Hello, good evening, good day, good morning. How is everyone wherever you are at this point in time? We are here on the Nigerian Pride coming to you from Jambo Radio Scotland, the first Afro Caribbean radio station in the heart of Paisley, just near the Glasgow International Airport. And this is the Nigerian Pride today, the 16th of February 2022. I hope the wind is not too heavy wherever you are. And if it is, please be careful and keep safe. If you have a trampoline at home, make sure you have all the good sandbag to hold it down and everything like that. So today is going to be a wonderful day because we've got a wonderful guest. And without wasting any time, I'm going to bring my guest in and we'll start today's show. Hello, guest.
Hi, good to see you, Olu. How are things?
I'm fine. It's good to see you too. So, just for people at home to know exactly who I'm speaking with and who I have here, because I know many people in Glasgow will know you, some in Europe will know you, but just for other wider audience, can you just introduce yourself, please?
Great to be here. My name is David McDonald. I'm the Deputy Leader of Glasgow City Council, and I'm also the Chair of Glasgow Life, which is the best job anyone can have anywhere in the city.
Okay, that's a good one, a good introduction. I like that last part. The best job, the chairman of Glasgow Life. Oh my God, I think that's one of the most busy job or the busiest job ever. Glasgow Life. I
It's
mean,
hugely busy. You get to work in every single community across the city. You get to work at local level, national level, international level. I quite often say being the chair of Glasgow Life is a bit like being Glasgow's ambassador to the world because it's about telling everyone how great Glasgow is as a cultural venue, as a place that people should come to live in, that they should come on their holidays, they should come for events to Glasgow. So I've got the great honour and privilege of being able to sell Glasgow internationally to the world. And it's been my real honour to have that job over these last 5 years.
cool. It's good to know that. Right. So that people will know, I'm gonna take us some years back. So we know. I would take it that you accept me to call you a politician. So how did you get into politics?
So my kind of route into politics was through the changes that Scotland was going through in the kind of late 1990s while I was still at school in Glasgow. And there was a lot of discussions amongst my peers at that point because the Scottish Parliament was just being established back in 1999 and in 2000. And it seems like a whole world ago now because the Scottish Parliament has become so embedded in people's lives and it's the main place of political discourse in Scotland. But because it was brand new back in the late 90s, it was something that really engaged people. And I, back then, as a 16, 17-year-old, suddenly realised, there is this whole world of politics that you could be engaged in. You can try and make a difference in your local community. So it was that early interest in the reawakening of democracy in Scotland that engaged me while I was still at school. And through chance more than anything else, I was introduced to the youth wing of the SNP. So I'm an SNP politician and councillor. And that really kick-started my journey getting involved in the youth politics. There was a lot of big social issues taking place in Glasgow at that point where young people's voice wasn't being fully heard. So again, it was an opportunity for me to try and use my voice as a young person in politics to make a positive change and difference. And I just enjoyed being part of improving the community that I was part of, that I lived in, and being able to make a difference at that stage on relatively small issues. But I suppose that got me hooked into politics, and from there I went on to become the national convener of the SNP's youth wing. And then in 2007, I was elected for the first time to Glasgow City Council, and the rest
Wow.
is most history.
Yeah, I never even knew that you were convener of the youth wing before. That's a new one for me. All right. So that explains many of it then. Now, there was something whilst I was out making my research about you before this. From two parts of the city. and I will tell you the words. And they were like, "Oh, we gave David McDonald as a gift to them." And the other were like, "No, we gave him to you and we have him back." And surely for people who will understand this, it's about Greater Pollok and Billiston. And those two, they all, I mean, I think they call the branch now is Shettiston branch, which covers which covers Shettiston, Carlton, and Billiston now, and then we have Greater Pollok and Cardona. So, which one exactly are you, or do you just say, "Well, I own the two of them"?
Um, so, so I'm a born and bred on the south side of Glasgow. So my heart is in the south side and in Pollok in particular, where my family live and where I live. But there was a chance in 2007 to stand for election. There wasn't that opportunity didn't exist for me though in my own local community, but in Baillieston, the community, the SNP branch in Baillieston, they were looking for a candidate who was different from the other candidates they had. So they were looking for somebody who was from an ethnic minority background, or they were looking for a woman or a young person. So I ticked the box of being a young person back then, and it was a great learning
Come on, you're
experience for
still
me.
young.
Well, I don't think I look or feel particularly young anymore, but I'll take that as the compliment. Olu, thank you. Um, but I've got a real affinity for that community of Baillieston and the different communities within it. Places like Wellhouse, which is in the shadow of Easterhouse, but is a fantastic community, really strong, a lot of pride in a community like that. And I felt a sense of connection that even though I didn't have family connections or place connections with that community, I could just feel a common bond of an affinity in those types of places. And so I still hold a really fond affection for Baillieston in my heart. But after 5 years of being the councillor there and doing my very best for that community, there was a chance to have a political homecoming in 2012 and to move to Greater Pollok, where, as I said, my family have lived in the south side of Glasgow for decades. And having the chance to represent the community that I grew up in, the community that all my family live in, that my friends live in, and the real honour for me was getting to carry my community's hopes forward and to be the champion for my community in the city chambers in a new way. So the last 10 years have been spent in Pollok, the 5 years before that in Baillieston. So both of them, either ends of the city in terms of one being in the far east and one being in the deep southwest, but communities that are rooted together because they've got that common sense of what working class communities where people are striving every day to do the very best for themselves, for their families, and to make the community a little bit better. That's the politics that I'm rooted in. That sort of social justice politics is where, that's my family background. That's why I got involved in politics. And I've just been so proud to have the opportunity to represent both of those communities.
Good, good. I mean, I like that. And, as you were just saying that, I just saw someone from the Billiston just saying, "Aye, he's ours." But that they just sent the text to me, but no problem about that. But, it's interesting. And you went to Billiston, you served them there. How, how did a Southside boy, a core southwest of Glasgow boy, was able to actually blend into that east end side?
I remember quite vividly going to a community meeting and felt there was a little bit of hostility. And somebody said at first they thought I was English and I had an English accent, which I don't think I've got a particularly strong English accent, but that put up barriers straight away. But then they found out I was a South Sider, and that was viewed as being even worse in many respects. But I think it just took a process of really winning people over, and people I think can tell if someone's genuine or not by the effort that they put in. So I tried every day to be in that community, to be available to it, and went to every single community meeting that I could. I tried to embed myself in youth organisations and sports organisations and community councils and housing associations. So it really is just about making yourself available, because I didn't think that I hadn't been elected as an SNP councillor, I hadn't been elected as David McDonald, an individual. I'd been elected to represent that community and the people in that community. So my job was really to prove myself capable of doing it. And very quickly, I think people responded to that because 2007 is a very different political landscape from the one we live in now. And most of those communities across Glasgow were used to having one type of politician, which was from one particular political party, and it tended to be someone who could weigh their votes. And they didn't really have to try, they didn't have to go to community events because they were more or less guaranteed to be re-elected every 4 or 5 years. So I think people appreciated having someone who was a bit more active, a bit more involved, and who wasn't just going to kind of sit back and only campaign on issues in the run up to elections, but who's actually going to get involved and be part of the community in a different way.
All right. And it's interesting to hear that story there. But the other thing that I thought of just is that how did you get through the campaign? How did you go into Billiston campaign and then even were able to beat those kind of politicians you spoke about there? How did that happen?
So much of my political career is based on good fortune and luck. So 2007 was the first election with the new system of proportional representation in place, so the STV ranking system for candidates. And the SNP at that point had a very popular local councillor called John Mason, who's now a member of the Scottish Parliament. But he was one of a small number of SNP councillors who'd actually been elected before STV. I think there was only maybe 3 SNP councillors out of almost 80 councillors in Glasgow who were SNP at that point. So John Mason had a very strong local reputation, again built on being an accessible, hardworking local councillor. So he was standing, I stood alongside him in that ward. So he had a personal vote, which helped to elect me. I was actually elected. This used to be my claim to fame, that I was elected with the least number of first preference votes of any candidate in Scotland who was successfully elected. So I got 250 first preference votes, but I got something like 1,800 second preference votes because everybody who voted for John Mason, number 1, voted for me, number 2. So that catapulted me into the lead. So we kind of cheated the system slightly because that's not really the way that you're supposed to operate the STV system. But it was a kind of standard traditional campaign in many ways. But because it was a new voting system, it really did work to my advantage, and it meant that both John and I got elected. About a year after that, there was then the Glasgow East by-election in 2008, where John was then elected as a member of the UK Parliament. So he left me to my own devices for a while, and then there was a by-election to replace him, where my friend and colleague David Turner eventually got elected at that election and continues to be a councillor for Billiston to this day. So I've had a great journey and a great opportunity to work and learn with lots of different types of politicians along the way, and proving that there is no single way to get elected. And anyone who's successfully elected, a lot of it is down to hard work, but you also need a little bit of luck along the way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You need a bit of luck and hard work. So we've got a bit of all of that. Let's now move into the life of being a councillor. What does that entail? I mean, how's a perfect day? I'm saying a perfect day to make it beautiful. How's a perfect day in the life of a councillor?
So I can speak both from the experience of being an opposition backbench councillor and also someone who has a lot of extra political responsibility, and they are very different roles, but both rooted obviously in being a representative of other people. So the way that we work has also been impacted hugely by COVID, because the type of community activity that most of us really cherish hasn't been something that we've been able to do over the last 2 years. But the typical kind of working day pre-COVID I guess, would involve a mixture of local community activities where you might be at meetings of housing associations, or you might go and have meetings with local third sector or charity organisations. You might have home visits with constituents about particular issues or challenges they're facing and need some help with. You could have site visits with officers, maybe to look at potholes or other types of issues that you need to report. And then in the city chambers, then you would maybe be in the city chambers to do committee meetings, depending on what your focus was and which committee you sat on, whether you were on the education committee or the health and social care committee. And already that would be a full working day for most people, but then you've got commitments in the evenings where you would have a community council, for example, or a tenants and residents association, or a whole host of activities. So pretty much 5 days a week, you're going to have a mixture of activities throughout the day. You might not be back to back so much, but there will be something probably every day at all hours of the day. And of course, the weekends don't tend to be a time for rest either, because there might be community events on a Saturday. Depending on the type of engagement you're also having, maybe a Sunday is a day where you might want to visit local churches or other organisations, for example. So it really can be a 7 day a week, 365-day year job. And that would just be as a hard-working local councillor. You've then got to add on to that, if you become a convener with a responsibility for a particular thematic topic, you will then have a lot of other meetings to try and fill in on top of that. And that is obviously what I have experienced over the last 5 years, having both the role as deputy leader of the council, which means you have to have a bit of oversight over everything that goes on. And then obviously my real focus as the city convener for culture, vibrancy and international cooperation, that's my full job title, means that I have a very varied diary of events every day. So those are all the aspects of the job. I love being that busy, but it is also really demanding and challenging, and there's never enough hours in the day sometimes to get through it all.
So how do you manage that with other commitments and responsibilities? Maybe being a father, being a partner, being a son, being a brother. How do you manage all of those responsibilities?
Yeah, so it's difficult, because I think it's one of the reasons why lots of people come into local government with really high hopes and the best expectations, but they find that it is really difficult to balance all of that with a proper, healthy work-life balance. So in many ways, I'm kind of heartbroken that a lot of people who came into local government at the last election are leaving at this next election coming up, citing the fact that you can't have, if you're doing this job properly, you can't really have that healthy work-life balance. So something has always got to give. And I've done it for 15 years, and I'm not standing again at the next election, and that's part of it. I've spent the best, almost all of my youth involved in politics, and I kind of feel that I do need that opportunity to take a pause and to reflect and to try something else for a while. So it is a danger across politics, not just at local government level, but politics as a whole, and not just politicians, but staff who work for politicians as well. The kind of burnout that happens is something that I have a lot of concerns about. And it's not a case of politicians or people working in politics asking for like special treatment or a special understanding, because everyone's under those pressures. But if we want our politicians to be in positive, healthy mindsets to make the best decisions and to represent us, then I think we do need to have a bit of an understanding that politicians are just people at the end of the day, and they also need time to switch off and spend with their families and their loved ones. So that's something I'm looking forward to having more time to do in the future. But yeah, it has always been something that I've really struggled to do, is properly find the time to switch off and to not answer the phone if it goes at night, or not just do one more email or something. So if anyone's got any tips of how to do that, I'm always all ears.
Okay, right. Since the day I've heard that yes, you're stepping back, I've always tried to avoid talking about the fact that you're stepping back. But day by day, as we count down to the end of this local council term, the reality keeps coming, and we're like, Okay, for real, he's going. Actually, he's going. And the question is, and you raise an important question there, which I believe many a time even politicians don't want to discuss it, not to talk of the media, and that is about the mental health of politicians themselves. Nobody seems to just care about how the politicians are feeling. We have some of them who are women who have children, and they have that that duty, and but how do you think we can help the mental health of our politicians?
Yeah, I think it is. Unfortunately, it's still a kind of a taboo subject for a lot of people, and I give great credit to colleagues of mine from within the city council, but and from other layers of government who have spoken out and who have taken the time to say, the pressure that they are under as individuals has led them to have mental health um, moments of worry or crisis in their lives. And I think we all need to have a bit more understanding for each other. But there's no within the media landscape. I think there is very little sympathy for politicians, and I understand why that exists. But I think it's really unfair to expect politicians to be some sort of superhuman that is um, not like everyone else, that they're not impacted by mental health and physical health problems and challenges, and that they don't have issues within their own lives that are going to impact them. So I think having a bit more empathy and understanding towards others is crucially important, and realizing that sometimes we get too caught up in the heat of politics, to remember that we are just fellow human beings, and we might wear different colour rosettes at election time, but we need to try where possible to have a greater understanding with people. And that's why I try. I've not always been the most unpartisan of politicians, but I always try and at least not to be too guided entirely by party political viewpoints, trying to understand the person behind the party rosette or the party colour. I think if we could all do a bit more of that, the world would be hopefully a better and a kinder place.
So I'm just going to spin something in there from what you just said and the mental health. And I mean, I didn't discuss this even with my producer, but I'm going to spin it in. So let's go back to the parties at number 10. Could it be that the prime minister was just trying to take care of his mental health and that of his staff?
Um, I think they've been desperate for good excuses to try and justify those parties in particular. I haven't heard them use that one, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's on next on their list of excuses. But um, I don't think we can say that at a time of national crisis, when everyone was having to comply with really strict and difficult rules to follow, that meant that people couldn't see their loved ones or their family, and that people couldn't go to you know life occasions, whether they were positive or negative and ones, or people couldn't go to funerals. I don't think trying to use people's mental health and their well-being as an excuse for those types of parties would really be appropriate. There's certainly other ways that people's mental health could have been looked after and cared for during lockdown, that could have included number 10 staff, that wouldn't have involved cake and alcohol and party games. So I wouldn't put it past number 10 trying that as an excuse in the future, but I don't think many people would be buying that as a reasonable or rational excuse.
Okay, I just thought I would spin that in and see. But yeah, that's a good one. And just to let you know, if you're just joining us, this is the Nigerian Pride, and we have Councillor David McDonald here, who is the deputy leader of the Glasgow City Council, the best city in the whole of Scotland and in the whole of the UK. And I can say the best city in the world. I mean, I've lived there for 13 years, so I can talk about it that way. Um, if you're just joining us, you can send us messages. You can reach us via the number on the screen. If you want to call in, you can call in. And if you want to just send a text, you can send a text. And talking about a text, actually, I think some of the wonderful constituents of yours you've done great things for have sent me messages, and I'm just gonna read out one of them. And this one says, when I needed help with housing, David helped me massively. He came along when I asked him to my meetings with the housing officer, and then not long after I got offered a bigger house. So that's someone appreciating what you've done for them. Another one is saying, well, Councillor McDonald is a very wonderful gentleman. He's always there to listen to you when you contact him. Even though he's been busy with Glasgow Life these days, he's still there to help. Oh, so this is showing. I mean, this. I mean, people will say this is what we celebrate as councillors. And the question I will be posing to you from those texts I've picked out there is that, okay, what events have been the most challenging to you so far?
So far. Well, first of all, thank you to those people that have gotten in touch. And I think I remember that particular housing case that you remembered, and the pleasure was mine helping that particular family, if it is the one that I think it is, and they got that bigger house in another part of the city. So I hope they're all keeping very well, because I know there was a lot of challenges. But it's those type of cases can be really difficult and really time consuming to try and just again understand that the individual case that you're working on for that person is probably the most important thing in their life at that time. And I might have 10 or 20 similar cases like that, but you've got to dedicate your time and energy and efforts into each of those individual cases as best you can. And sometimes you can help people, but sometimes there's nothing that you can really do, or you can't get, if somebody needs a house, there might not be the house that's suitable for their needs, for example. And being able to, I suppose, deal with that level of disappointment and the feeling that you're letting someone down can be really difficult and challenging to deal with as an individual. So those types of cases are always really difficult to deal with. But in terms of the biggest challenge that I've had to deal with, unquestionably, has been the last 2 years. And the restrictions that we've had to operate under. So as the chair of Glasgow Life in particular, has probably been the hardest hit of any service in the city as a result of the COVID regulations. We've lost almost £40 million of income as an organisation.
Wow.
because of closure of services or the cancellation of events. And we've had to find a way of ensuring that the kind of lifeline local services that people rely on, whether it's community centres or libraries, were able to reopen in a time of unprecedented challenge for the organisation. And it's taken a lot of hard work. It's taken a little bit longer than I know many people across the city would have liked, but we now are at a stage where the first time since the pandemic, we've got all of our libraries either reopen or in the process of being refurbished as part of a multi-million pounds investment in those libraries. And we're starting now to see more and more venues coming back online and reopening, including some this week that we've been able to announce. So hopefully we're starting to leave some of the negatives and the challenges of COVID behind and moving forward into that recovery and renewal period for Glasgow Life to get back to a little bit of business as usual and business as it was before COVID.
Okay, that's good to know. And I believe that, from what we had earlier today, the People's Palace will be opening soon as well after its renovation, and then there will be other plans for it as well. Just as you were talking about that, another message came in. Can you ask David, will all our libraries be really reopened back to us? Is it true that some of them will never open again?
So all of the Glasgow libraries are now either open, or the ones that are still closed are closed because they're being refurbished. So, for example, Woodside or Elder Park Library, the only reason those libraries are currently closed is because they are getting multi-million pounds refurbishments of those libraries, and they're both scheduled to open later this year. So we are working to ensure that libraries remain open. The council budget meeting is tomorrow, and I think we will see all political parties making a conscious decision to ensure that libraries are properly budgeted for and they have the budget that they need. So there was obviously a lot of campaigning that took place around libraries over the last few months. And I always tried to be clear and open and upfront with people to say, yes, we have some major challenges. We didn't have all of the money that we needed to get libraries open, but we did manage to make a successful bid to the Scottish Government, to the Scottish Libraries Information Centre, to get that last little bit of money that we needed, which meant we have been able to open libraries. And just yesterday, we announced that 8 libraries have gone back to their full-time pre-COVID opening hours as well. So we are slowly and surely we are starting to get back to pre-COVID levels of delivery. But it's strange because we also have a challenge of staffing where a lot of staff maybe over the last 2 years while they weren't working have maybe retired or have moved on to other jobs and roles. So we do, as a city, still have some issues around ensuring that we've got enough staff to keep those library centres and venues open. And that probably is our biggest challenge at the moment to navigate rather than funding or COVID.
Oh, okay. I mean, that's an interesting one to hear. So, okay, so we need more people to be trained into those jobs and to take those jobs. Okay, that's good to know. Now, you've touched on the budget, and we know that is a big thing. Is a big day tomorrow in Glasgow about the budget. Would that should we be looking for a people's budget or a court budget? Just putting you in the knife here. But yeah, what should we look forward to as the people of Glasgow? Remember, you say people make Glasgow.
Yeah, so there has been every year since the SNP's come into office, we've tried to improve the budget setting process because I don't think anyone who has experienced the way that Glasgow sets it would think that it's a process really fit for purpose because there are a lot of challenges and issues around how the budget is set. And every political party probably shares those frustrations, but no one's quite come up with a better way of delivering budgets in Glasgow that would give more people the chance to feed into the process. But what we have done over the last few years is have citizens panels that have been set up where people are brought together, a kind of cross-representative group of the city is brought together. It's independently facilitated by Ipsos Mori, the polling company, and they go through with people the various challenges that the city faces in terms of its finances, and they present the different type of options that politicians might face. And from that, people are able to put forward their priorities and their ideas of what's important to them as citizens of Glasgow, what services they would like to be protected. And then all of that information is then given to elected members so that as each group puts together its budget proposals, which will be debated tomorrow, there's a chance for them to include the views of Glaswegian citizens in their budget proposals. So it's an improvement from what we used to do, which was very little in the way of public engagement, but it's still not perfect. And I'm sure colleagues who get re-elected in the next term of the council will continue to look at ways of trying to improve the budget setting process. Because again, the city does face a lot of financial challenges, and I think anyone who follows local government fairly closely will be aware that there is a kind of budget gap between what was available last year and what will be available next year for spending. So as politicians, we have to try and find a way that causes the least amount of damage with that process. But we also need to be aware of the emerging issues. For example, the rising cost of living, and is there something we can try and do within the budget tomorrow that sees the council supporting those communities who are most at risk with the rising costs that we see, whether it's food prices or household utilities? What can the council do to try and support people who are within the poorest, most vulnerable parts of our society? So you could maybe expect some proposals to come forward in the budget tomorrow around that. But there should also be, I imagine, a lot of discussion around how we get the basic services right in terms of cleansing and parks and roads and those types of areas. So it's definitely going to be a budget that I think tries to deliver a little bit of additional care and attention to Glasgow and to our communities.
Good. I mean, thank you for that. And just moving forward, because you touched on some other issues there, and most one thing I want to pick out from which I believe during the pandemic and as we come out of it, people have been talking about is the issue of the state of cleanliness of the city, and that you go to different part of the city, and yes, some can be blamed on the indiscipline of people of the community, but then in terms of that service, I know, yes, we're going to greatly miss you when you go, but looking to the future of the city, how well can we avoid those issues that happen before COP and after COP?
Yeah, so Glasgow, as far I think it's important to say that Glasgow wasn't unique during that time because every council across the UK and indeed probably across Europe was suffering from a lack of resources and a lack of staff. We've got to remember again when we spoke earlier about how politicians are just people. Also, the staff who deliver these services are people that face the same challenges as everyone else. So, a lot of staff, for example, were impacted by COVID. They were either ill or they were having to take time to self isolate or to care for others. So, they couldn't be doing their frontline service. So, we were short of staff resources to actually deliver some of the cleansing services that people need and rely on. But as things have improved, though, that service has started to come more and more back online. And some of the delays that were caused during COVID when we prioritised household collection of refuse rather than other areas like graffiti, for example, we're now running to kind of catch up on some of those topics. And I think nobody would disagree that it was the right thing to do to prioritise household waste during that period. But to having made that decision to prioritise it did mean that something else had to give somewhere else. But I think the city is getting back on track, getting certainly closer to the kind of standards that we would all hope and expect. But there was a lot of, I think, false fake news and media around at the time where people were trying to denigrate Glasgow at a time when it was welcoming the world in the run up to COP. And that was disappointing for me, but I think it was probably to be expected that those people who like talking Glasgow down will take any opportunity to do that. But I know for a fact that the same cleansing issues that Glasgow faced were being faced across Europe, and from conversations with other city leaders during COP, they were really fulsome in their praise for Glasgow. And Frans Timmerman, the vice president of the European Union, spoke about how much he enjoyed walking around in Glasgow and how he'd been to the city in the 1980s, where he said the city was, a desolate waste ground, but now that Glasgow had been transformed and it was a really clean and positive place to be. So I would tend to take the kind of views of those people before the views of people who find it really easy to throw sticks and stones at Glasgow in the hope of tarnishing the great legacy and the work that the city has put into being an international city and being proud to take our place on the world stage.
Yeah, and the thing is, I respect the fact that these questions are coming in and you are responding to it, because you, in your position, you are actually the ambassador, the cultural ambassador of the city. You are like our ambassador to the world and everything like that. And during the COP time when we had the issue with the GMB and things like that, I don't know why they did that during that time, anyways, but I was, how did you deal with that? Because sometimes I'll look at you on some videos, try to get a sense of, oh my god, this guy is the one having to face all this. I mean, how did you deal with that? How did you deal with all those situations?
Well, Again, thanks for the compliment, but this is really much a team game. So, it's not just a case that I do anything. In fact, most of those issues were dealt with by my other colleagues who I think done a fantastic job in being able to make sure that the city looked at its very best. And of course, we have from time to time a challenging relationship with our trade union colleagues, but I think we know that everyone shares that same passion for Glasgow and they want Glasgow to be the best. And the staff rightly are able to exercise their rights as trade union members and to withdraw their labour. That's entirely their choice and right to do so, and nobody would want to deny people having those rights, because that's what has won us all so many rights in terms of our employment laws. So we've got to have a process of give and take where we understand that people are campaigning for better terms and conditions, but that we also have a shared responsibility to make sure that the city wasn't being let down or embarrassed at hosting a major event like COP. So, I think my colleagues across neighbourhoods in Regeneration, Anna Richardson, my colleague Alan Casey, who's our workforce convener, and the council leader Susan Aitken, were all far more involved in those types of conversations than I was. I think all of them kind of done everything they possibly could do to make sure that Glasgow looked its best for all of the delegates that were coming from around the world, but crucially that it also looked its best for Glaswegians, because it should never be a case that there's special treatment for when big events take place. We want that standard to be in place regardless of who's coming to Glasgow, because Glaswegians are the most important people to us, so we want the city to always look and feel as best as it possibly can.
Good, good. And I'm sure Glaswegians are proud of you saying what you've just said, and all your colleagues as well. Now, just to make sure we touch on this one, because I've had messages on it as well, and this is about the Scotland School Sex Survey or Scotland School Child Survey. A lot has been going on. Already we know that at least 10 out of the 32 local councils have said they have to review it. But our own city, the city of Glasgow, is going ahead with it. And I know there's been so many concerns, some that, you don't just accept the way it has been coordinated. But when you look at the ethnic minorities, like the Muslims, all others, there are concerns about it that, there are parts of it that in some culture, in some beliefs, it's just not to be discussed, not to be taught about. It's not, having boyfriend or girlfriend, they are just not topics. How do we deal with this? How do we deal with this?
So I think we deal with it by, first of all, recognising people's right not to take part for religious reasons, moral reasons, ethical reasons, whatever. I don't think any child or family, for example, is going to be forced to take part in the survey. So I think that needs to be the starting point, that we respect people's individual views or their family views and how those are shaped. But just before this show started, there was an advertisement for the mental health stigma survey that's taken place. I was listening in just before we came on air, and that kind of made me think, well, these sort of surveys are really important for us because it gives us a snapshot of society as it is at the moment. So we spent a lot of time already talking about mental health today. So that stigma survey that will be carried out will help the government, the NHS and services understand what level of provision of service is needed. And I think this survey is kind of in a similar vein required because councils, child psychologists, the NHS and others really need to have an understanding and a knowledge of the type of social issues that young people are experiencing. And I know that a lot of the media focus on the survey has focused on issues around sex and relationships, but the survey itself goes beyond that to look at other issues of health and well-being. So I think we, yes, need to recognise where people might have challenges with some of those questions, but I would also hope that those people would recognise that this is about making sure we've got the right services for those young people who actually need help and support from the state. So I think the survey is really important. I think that's why Glasgow is going ahead with the survey, because we, as a place, I think perhaps have the largest number of young people of any local authority in Scotland. It's really important that we ensure that we've got the services that those young people need. I don't think we can just sort of ignore the changing social attitudes or behaviours that take place, where young people today might do the kind of thing that you or I, Ulu, when we were younger, may or may not have done. But
Yeah.
we need to have knowledge and understanding, and we need to have that data, because we need to make sure we've got the services in place to support those young people who do need it. So those are my kind of personal thoughts on it. But at the same time, I do recognise for a lot of people there are particular questions that they find uncomfortable or challenging based on their views. So,
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that. Then, I'm just going to use this also just to say to all the people listening out there, especially those in Glasgow, that, for this survey, there are parts that, it's there to tell you that if you don't want to answer this part of the survey, you can leave it and skip it and just go on. And I know some people have been like, oh, why is it ID? Why is it's not just postcode and this and things like that? But I myself have looked at the link today and I've seen that, you know what? Actually, you can skip wherever you want to skip. If you don't want to even give your name, that's fine. You can go on and the survey will just go on and submit itself. So please, people, let's encourage our young ones to answer the survey. It's not compulsory they answer all the parts. You can answer the one you want, and if you don't want to answer the other part, that's fine. But we need the survey in to help the services we provide for our young ones. Right. Just before we go, because I'm looking at our time there. So what next? What next after May? What next?
so there's a lot. I've got a lot of plans. I need to figure out which ones will actually become reality and which ones will just remain as dreams for a little while. But I suppose my plan is to take a bit of a break and to have some of that personal time that we spoke about, and maybe try COVID allowing, maybe try and fit in a holiday or something would be quite nice. But I am also, I'm still going to be as committed as ever to my own community in Pollok. So I've got some ideas of organisations locally that I would like to remain part of and to help and to support. I've been fortunate that during lockdown I helped establish an organisation called G53 Together, which has helped thousands of people during the lockdown period. And I think that that is an organisation that can really grow and develop and be something special and unique for the community of Pollok, but also other communities across the southwest of the city. So I'd like to spend a little bit of time supporting them. But I will also be making the transition out of politics, but not removed from democracy, because I'm going to be joining an organisation called the Democratic Society, which are a European-based not-for-profit organisation who promote participative and deliberative forms of democracy. And, that, again, going all the way back to the start of the conversation, we were speaking about the power that people have got to make a difference. So this is an organisation that really put people at the heart of the decision-making process, which is something I've tried to do over the last 15 years. So I'm looking forward to taking on a new challenge there and finding new and more meaningful ways to get people involved in democratic discussions about the future of their communities, about the future of Scotland, on topics like climate or on the use of the use of artificial intelligence, on issues around city development. A huge amount of really interesting things that I'm going to be involved in as part of that role with the Democratic Society. So I'm really looking forward to that and finding other opportunities as they come along of staying involved in some way in the sort of public life of Glasgow, because having spent the last 15 years doing it, it would be too difficult, I think, to walk away entirely. But I'll find the right ways to stay involved, which means I can be a productive member of our city community, and I think just continue to try and do in a different way what I've done over these last 15 years.
Hey, thank you so much for that. I mean, there's so many questions, but we're short on time already, and I've been seeing messages from my producer. But what I would say, I mean, I've got a lot of messages here just saying thank you to you. It's been a wonderful service of 15 years, and I would just echo that on behalf of everyone, on behalf of the whole of Glasgow, to say a big thank you to you. 15 years dedicating it to us. Those 15 years are 15 years where people would jump up, just do other things for themselves, but you've sacrificed that for Glasgow. And on behalf of the people of Glasgow, thank you so much for the service. And thank you for saying that, yes, you'll still be with Pollok, because Pollok is my own local community as well. And I've been looking forward to that. Thank you so much, David, for finding time for us today. We really appreciate it. And we wish you the best as move on with the future. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you. And I look forward to continuing that working relationship and working with you in Pollok to make the community an even better place in the future, I hope. So thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. So, on that note, everybody, that's it. You have it there. We have just been able to speak to one of our best in Glasgow. And, yeah, he's leaving, but not leaving. But that's the way we want it. Next week, we will be bringing another wonderful personality from the world of politics who has also been a councillor. In his case, is a different case. But watch out for that. Next week will be another wonderful time. On that note, have a good evening.